Welcome to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast. I'm your host, Troy Hammond, and on today's episode, we're chatting with my friend, Auriga Martin. Auriga is an American who moved to New Zealand, started her life in the desert in California, and has recently just finished her last role as the CEO of a tech startup in the fintech world. She's had a really interesting story, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I did.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning in to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army. I always dabble in the creative side, like you know. I mean, I started Ventana, and so film is probably my ultimate destination. Funny, I'll probably go off to the creative arts after my tech career, but so Celia Jaspers is a good friend of mine. You probably know her from Martin Rowe days, and she's been directing TV for a long time, and she needed kind of a push and a nudge to get into the creative space, more narrative film, and often the right way to start is, you know, a stepping stone with a short, low budget, low risk short film. And she just wrote this little short film when she was going crazy in lockdown. And me, typical Auriga catalyzer, just said, let's do it. We can do it, of course. We'll find whatever we need. And so I was a producer behind the scenes, just getting everyone lined up, getting a lot of sponsorship on board. And we shot it for 2 days in October, 2020, just after lockdown, 2021. Yeah. And everything was donated. Milk. Yeah. It's only 4 minutes. But it's been in 105 film festivals globally now.
I know.
And it's won like 65 awards. I mean, it's insane. It's like the perfect little medicine for people right now, just with all the sort of doom and gloom. It's like just a little positivity antidote for people.
It's a sweet little story.
Yeah. It makes it in. It's kind of, you know, a little bit cheesy, but it really warms the heart, and it's like a good like multi-generational story. And
but as someone that like lived in Martinborough for a long time, that's kind of something that you would kind of see in Martinborough, right? And so and
it's really relatable, I think, to a lot of regions and small towns, you know, everywhere. And so Charlotte she made a name for herself. She did a great job. And she now has like a full-on agency, and she's landed a couple commercials, and now I think she's B actor in this series, so she's not on camera all the time, not one of the main leads, but definitely one of the side actors.
Well, how cool that be to launch someone's career off a little short film in Martinborough, shot at Kitchener's of all places.
I know. Yeah, and Kitchener's, the whole family was involved. Like Christy's now done a couple shoots with Celia. Yeah. She's just done another one called what's it called? Something political. They actually were able to shoot in part of Parliament. I'll remember what the name is later. I was out of town for that one, but
that made me so homesick seeing Kitchener's in that little film. I was like, oh, Kitchener's like, Jono is like the little, you know, that's like the little, how would you describe it? Like farming cafe almost. Like it's open at like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Iconic, right? Iconic.
Yeah, and so you'd go there and you'd get like really cheap bacon and eggs that were the best bacon and eggs you ever have in your life, and get your coffee every morning.
Start your commute right.
Oh yeah, so good. It was the only place open in the morning to like when we were commuting into town.
Totally.
And so when I see Kitchener's, it's just like like a pang for Martinborough a little bit.
Yeah, they probably still remember your coffee order too if you were to go.
100%.
It's amazing.
Anytime I go, like she's like running it. Hey,
mine like a steel trap. They're incredible.
They're like the epitome of like little rural community towns. People like that are like the pillars of the community, right?
Yeah. Well, and they're also raising money for the pump track. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No.
So, you know, the other side of my life is all about biking and racing. So Ed's been consulting for this big pump track project, which is it's grown in size since lockdown. Basically, we planned it and started the whole discussion, but the whole community wants to get behind it because biking is now like such a good economic driver for rural regions. It's been like proven. And so a whole bunch of rural towns in New Zealand especially are like going after these multi-purpose bike wheels, like family sort of initiatives. And this pump track in particular is going to be built by one of the top trail makers in New Zealand. Wow. And it's going to be tar sealed, and it's going to be huge. I think
Where is it?
I don't know the exact figures, but maybe like a quarter of an acre in size. So it'll be all ages, all sizes. It'll have some pretty big things and then smaller things. Just right on Considine Park.
Oh, wow.
Across from the big church.
That's amazing.
I know. So, the Kitchener's team and the family have been behind it. Sue and Bruce have donated money, and they also do all the fundraising. And they're kind of like the nexus point for all the meetings, and they always have a collection on their counter. Yeah, it's really cool. The Marty pump track.
Sue was like the matriarch of
I know,
Martinborough for
she's
me.
incredible. And she's not like a long timer either. She's a transplant.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
I love that that's a thing in Martinborough.
I know, right? You're not a local to your 80.
This is Auriga Martin of Martinborough.
Totally.
Yeah, so let's go back then. How the hell did you end up in Martinborough? Like, you grew up in, what's it called?
Well, Southern California.
Yeah.
But Ojai was my
Ojai,
predominant hometown, which is...
Anytime I've seen photos of it, I'm like, is it like Burning Man? You know,
It is, but it's all walks of life. But it has become so ridiculously gentrified that I hardly even recognize it. Because I just did, 4 weeks back in the States. And it's full of... it's always been kind of a retreat for LA people. But now it's like second home and primary home for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, celebrities often live there, and you'll see like Justin Bieber or Brad Pitt or
Wow.
whoever walking down the street, Reese Witherspoon. But so in that sort of context, the town is like very wealthy, well off, but new agey too, because a lot of people have idle time. So you grow up kind of with everything being acceptable, and you've been exposed to all kinds of new age philosophy. And there's also this really other weird phenomenon that's got a lot of private schools.
Yeah.
So people send their kids there to evolve and develop as people. And so I was really lucky to go to a great school there just down the street from where my hometown house was.
So what was it like before it was gentrified then?
Well, it was pretty out there, California. I mean, so it's been a sort of a celebrity hangout since the 20s, like 1920s. So for a long time, it's got a really beautiful architecture and kind of out there thinking, and a lot of creative thinking, but also that new age thing. So a lot of retreats and a lot of yogis and philosophical people and thought leaders will bring people from all over the world, and they'll have retreats in Ojai.
Yeah.
So when I, for my 13th birthday, my friends all came over and we had a sweat lodge party.
For your 13th birthday.
Totally, because it's Ojai means the nest in Chumash. So you learn how to walk like a Native American Indian. You know how to weave flax or sage and make soap out of natural materials. So that's just par of the course. It just it goes hand in hand with everyday life in Ojai. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really cool town, but it's also a little bit over the top a lot of the time. And I've really enjoyed living in New Zealand, particularly in rural New Zealand, because you have such a stronger connection to the ground. Yeah. You're not floating up in the clouds. But conversely, I also really love that sort of really expansive, creative mindset and approach where you can do anything, That's
kind of formed your DNA, right?
From totally.
Growing up there. As long as I've known you, you've always had some crazy creative idea on the go, trying to get something off the ground. And I love that.
That's me. Can't box me in.
No. And so how what do you do in the town like that? How long did you stay there? What do you do? Is it?
Well, I was mainly there for school. So I went to high school there at a great school called Thatcher, and worked my ass off. I have not worked harder in my life than I did those 4 years in high school. And
can you call Molly and talk to her about this?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny. We're looking at sending the girls there. But basically, they set you up with everything you need to be a contributing member of society. And in a really good way, amazing. You just learn an incredible work ethic, but you also learn about community. Yeah. And you learn how to conduct yourself with adults and be sort of really confident in what you're trying to say and communicate.
Is that something that happens in every school in America, though? Because I feel like as person on the outside looking into America, everyone can just naturally have this orating ability to be able to talk well, to be able to present in front of a group. And you're like, man, do they get trained in school on how to be a public speaker and how to have confidence? And
well, I think you always have to sell the dream. Being an American means you always have to have something that you believe in, and you've got this motivation and purpose behind you, and that's sort of part of our culture. Yeah. But I think at that school that I was lucky to go to, they kind of took it to the next level where it's really about structured thinking and really getting something ground, rungs on the ladder, making sure that you're hitting traction and you're actually forming a good plan, a solid plan, and really pushing yourself. I mean, it used to be a prep school for Yale and was all boys in the 1800s. It's been around for a long time. It's been really interesting, actually. They've had a big shift and complete reorganization because it's been so old school and traditional for a long time. So in the last few years, they've completely changed the leadership structure and taken on a really new sort of modern approach to how you form community. But Yeah, kind of. It's like a little incubator, kind of like a startup, actually. And you get so much support, and you have such a supportive, safe environment that everyone just is at their best and they thrive, and that diversity of thought just really prevails. And yeah, I've formed lifelong friendships from that school, and that was really why I was in Ojai and sort of my formative years.
Awesome! What a cool childhood.
Yeah.
And then, so what did you do after high school?
So I was one of the more creative types in our school, and
No surprises.
Yeah. So I really wanted to go into film. That was my passion, and studied quite a bit of film actually while I was still in high school, and did this amazing photojournalism series on a whole bunch of the living artists that were in Ojai. Some really quite famous people like Beatrice Wood when she was still alive, and so I was able to put together a pretty compelling portfolio and got into UCLA, and where I went from like one of 30 in this classroom where everyone knew me and the most amazing attention to my unique attributes, to being a 9-digit number at UCLA. And I was part of the fine arts program there, and quickly realized that it was not for me. It was very conceptual, and it was all about shock value and just really the worst of LA art at the time. Not really about the fundamentals of art and creating something of value, but really what statement are you trying to make? It was really good education. It was really, adversity that helped shape me and the way I sell, my dreams and what I'm working on, and try and get people on board, because I was surrounded by people that just were of a different school of thought.
Yeah.
And so I felt very much like a fish out of water at UCLA, but that propelled me to go overseas, and I spent some time in Greece on an island, and I realized that art actually wasn't my thing, and I wanted to be successful, and I wanted to learn the way of business, and I wanted to actually have impact, and not saying that an artist can't have impact, but at the time it was not the path that I chose. And after I got back from overseas, I started my career in tech.
So how do you go from being dropping out of UCLA to getting a job in tech? Well, it's easier in the States, let's be honest, but how do you do that?
Well, I actually finished at UCLA. I graduated, and I went to my first internship at AOL at a call center. It was so surreal, actually, to be part of like 1,000 people in a room back in early 2000s. And I quickly went through the ranks, and I was put on the VIP accounts team. So basically, I did password reset for all the celebrities that had AOL accounts, and a lot of them had AOL accounts because of the silly movies and Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks and You've Got Mail, and all of that branding they did in the 90s was still kind of carrying them through. And it was terrible. I had like the night shift, and I was like just a little peon, but I kind of enjoyed having the numbers and the metrics to kind of work around, and you would get paid more if you handled the call in 30 seconds or less. And so I kind of learned the system and worked it, and I observed sort of how the management structure worked, and so carried that through what my next job was actually lynda.com. And I started as an intern there too.
And what number employee you were there? You were there early, hey?
I was one of the first 10 at lynda.com. Yeah, they just had a big disruption because of 9/11. 2001, September 11th. Basically their entire business model stopped overnight.
So talk us through people that don't know what lynda.com is, which is now LinkedIn, obviously, but what was LinkedIn.com?
Yeah, so LinkedIn Learning used to be a really well-known website called lynda.com with multiple millions of users globally, creating creative and technical content, training, educational material, and video format streaming on the web.
Yep.
But when I started there, it was actually Lynda herself who basically created a whole bunch of curriculum and did in-house training with a series of tutors that would come basically prepare like a week-long workshop on things like Dreamweaver, Photoshop, Flash. Yep. And Lynda Weinman, the founder, was a dear family friend, and she actually wrote one of the first books on designing web graphics.
Wow.
So some say she's the mother of the internet, and she published the first like web design color palette and really started getting people into vector animation, and just brought her passion, because she also came from an art background. She was an art center teacher for many years, and decided that she'd ride this digital wave and had, some of the first early Macintosh Blueberry computers. And so I started in that time frame when it was shifting from basically this 9/11 disruption overnight to, okay, we've got to get this content online so people can
What was the disruption from 9/11?
So travel budgets were cut immediately.
Course, yeah.
All planes were grounded after the Trade Towers attack. And it was pretty amazing pivot in the business, to be fair. And this was before Netflix. This is before any other video content was hosted. So basically, I was an intern shrink wrapping DVDs and books down in the shipping department, and I went to help with some of their first early experiments on the video content. I think we had like a fireworks training course that had just been recorded, sort of like this setup here with a podcast setup. And it had so many problems, and no one knew how to edit it. They didn't know how to compress it for web. And so I just spent some time actually learning how it worked and learning the system and learning all the compression algorithms. And I ended up taking over the whole department in 1 month. And I got these 3 titles out the door, as messy as they were. But that was the beginning of a whole new era. We basically brought in sound recording booths. We got, omnidirectional mics set up. We got all these amazing server RAID technology towers from Apple. And we started creating a shit ton of content.
Awesome.
And that was, that would have been 2001 later that year.
Wow.
Video became the main focus from that day forward. Yeah.
And that's something or other anyone I talk to on the podcast, when I ask them how did the foray into tech go, it's usually because they're just like, I just did this thing that no one else wanted to do or no one else understood how to do it, and I just figured it out, and then that's how my sort of career started. So talk me through that. Like, how do you just put yourself in a position and just learn and figure it out? Like, what was it about that particular time that you were just like, fuck it, I can do that? Yeah,
well, I think naturally tech people and tech leaders, and particularly people in product, are natural problem solvers. So they're always looking for gaps that need filling. They're always looking to create value. And so we're quite proactive people. And so in that scenario, I just wanted to help Linda, my friend, keep her business alive. And I found great opportunity in just picking up the pieces and running with it and doing the best that I could. And it was pretty low stakes risk at that point because there was a discussion on whether or not video was going to be an option and whether or not we could make it viable and whether or not we knew what we were doing. And to get those 3 titles out the door was pretty exciting. So I often find myself in that sort of picking up the pieces mode, or identifying some value stream or some sort of new innovation that could, it's within reach. And it's something that if you just push hard enough, with the right attitude and the right people. So it's really always about people and the team that you form around solving problems. You've got to make sure everyone's heading in the right direction. Absolutely, diversity is important, and bringing in different perspectives will make you get a better result. But I think it's just that natural inclination to be helpful.
Awesome. And that's and then obviously you're with Linda for a while, because when I first met you in Martinborough, you were working for Linda from a cupboard.
Yeah, remotely. That's right. The pantry on the farm.
Yeah.
And I had, back then we had, I worked remote pretty much my whole time there. I was there for 12 years. And before that, I was in Idaho and Utah with my husband, Edward. And so I was always involved in, whatever needed doing. I often started as one person, and then an entire department would follow. So I did a lot of travel around the country doing events and business development. And my last role with Linda was involving, first I acquired most of the authors that were creating the content. So I'd sign the authors and acquire our library of content. And then finally, I got into product management. So I have Linda to thank for my start in the product management space, and actually went to training in Silicon Valley with all of the greats, the original product agile people. And so that was really fun and exciting. And I was able to transition that to a remote role. Back in, I moved in 2007 to New Zealand, to the farm in Martinborough. And it was so funny because, VC was sort of always very enterprise and very expensive. And we had this crazy expensive Polycom system all throughout the offices at Linda.com. And I'd be one of the only ones calling in and leading and hosting the meeting. But on the farm, we had this weird thing that would happen every spring where the weeds would grow up into the grass, and that would short out the electrical fence on the neighbor. So at the copper exchange box 2 kilometers down the road, there'd be this like whipping sound in the phone line. And you can actually fix it with these suppressors. And finally, they put on enough suppressors so that the whipping sound wasn't there. But before that, every spring, every time I was off mute, there would be like this pshoo, pshoo, whipping noise every time I would speak. And it was quite funny because it was in this like big, great conference setup with Polycom and like loudspeaker.
And all I could hear is
Auriga with my intention.
Yeah. Don't worry, that's just cows getting whipped or something.
Yeah. No, I'd always have to explain the whole fence line and the farm, and I'd show them the view and the pictures. They all loved it, actually.
Awesome.
And my favorite joke was always, "I'm calling from your future."
Nice. I know. I loved it when
Got me a lot of laughs.
First started dealing with Americans, and it'll be like, "Oh, so what day is it there?"
Totally.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Calling from your future.
So let's go back a little bit. Product management. What was it about? You said that, thank you to Linda for sort of your career, what was essentially your career in product. What was it about product that you saw that really resonated with you, and why did that feel like such a good home?
Yeah, well, I love working with people, and I am like ambivert, probably not full extrovert, but I love bringing out the maximum potential in others and with others. So product has always been a natural fit for me because it's all about that cross-functional team that is really owning their own destiny, and they've got full empowerment and trust, and they've got the right environment to just push boundaries and really go far and innovate quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm almost addicted to creating that right environment and those ingredients with a team to achieve, really big things. And, sometimes the harder the task, the more fun and exciting, which is why I keep taking on these impossible sectors.
Yeah. We're going to get to that soon.
Yes.
But
So product is a natural way to set up an organization for success and innovation and moving at pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you're able to do that from a cupboard or pantry in Martinborough.
Absolutely. It's all about relationships. So once you get to know people really well, and I did travel quite a bit. Air New Zealand loved me. I was their #1 AirPoints member. And they used to always see me coming every month. I'd fly sometimes with my babies. Yeah. Back to lynda.com, and they'd sometimes shut down the whole first class cabin, which is crazy. They thought I was some sort of celebrity, but it was just Auriga doing her job, getting back on the plane again. And so traveling and meeting the team and having really strong connections with people is essential. And then once you have that, you can do anything from anywhere in the world. I had teams in Romania, I had teams in Oregon, teams in California, sometimes India.
Wow, awesome. And then, so why Martinborough then? Why did you move to Martinborough?
True love. Yeah. My Kiwi husband, Ed, who I imported from Greece, where I was going to art school, and he was my souvenir, and he came back to the US with me.
So you met him in Greece?
Yeah.
I always thought you guys met in Utah.
No. I met him on Paros when I was at art school at UCLA.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was a typical traveling Kiwi working in a pub as a DJ.
Classic.
And love at first sight. We were 20 years old. The girls were making fun of me the other day. They're like, "You've been together for so long." So he came back to the States with me, and we've always been yin and yang. We, for as much as I'm an indoor tech nerd corporate person, he's the outdoorsman of all outdoorsmen.
He's like Bear Grylls, that guy.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. He can do it all with his bare hands.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was getting into his avalanche forecasting career, and so being in North America was the perfect place. Yeah. And he got certified with his level 2 avalanche license in Canada, and then started his job with the Department of Transportation in Idaho, and I would do my lynda.com thing, flying around the country, and yeah.
Wow. And then he convinced you, which is not the usual, right? It's normally us guys that, get brought around the world, but us, me being in New Zealand.
Somehow he managed to convince me to come to the middle of nowhere on the farm in New Zealand, a sheep and beef farm. But he won me over the moment I saw it. We visited shortly after we met, and it's just a gorgeous piece of property, and we were able to buy a piece of land from the family, and we've now built ourselves our own off-grid eco-paradise, which Ed, of course, did with his bare hands.
Yeah, I want to know all about that because I've seen it, and it is phenomenal. I had actually Thanksgiving last year, the year before.
Yeah, last year. We had another big one.
Yeah, so good. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. What are you thankful for?
Very thankful for the summer, actually, because I was in the States just last week, actually, and it's cold there. It's fall, and it's like going to be a real season. Lots of snow coming, and being here in like beautiful New Zealand and getting a sunburn today, and
it's beautiful,
having time to just enjoy life. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I was talking to someone before about that. It's right now that I miss the Wairarapa the most because it's just like such beautiful weather out there every day.
Well, we'll see you in no time, Troy. No doubt.
You will. Yeah, I'll come out. And so, Eco House. What the fuck did you do that for? Obviously I know the story a little bit about how mad this was. But how the hell did you decide? Why did you decide to build an off-grid Eco House?
Well, let me tell you, going back to my California roots and the hippie childhood, and I did lose a wonderful family member to cancer quite suddenly and rapidly in my teen years. My stepfather, he died of a really aggressive brain cancer. So I kind of, one of my formative memories was living chemical free and finding a way to kind of live in a healthy house and healthy home. Mm-hmm. So when it came time to explore building options on the farm, and I'm from California and I love being warm, and so straw bale was always number one, front of mind. In the States, it's also quite a cheap way of building. So we explored straw bale, and I did what I usually do, and I nudged Edward forward, and I sent him to a straw bale building workshop and taught him. He learned basically how to plaster and build straw bale walls, and he got his tiling license and certification. And so he basically figured it out, and he built us it wasn't meant to be our dream home, but it ended up taking a long time. I think you probably remember the early talks.
I remember you showing me the piece of land that you were potentially going to
buy.
Yeah,
it took, from start to finish, the whole process was 8 years, but we took our time designing the house because we really wanted to make sure, we could afford it and it was, reasonable because, with Auriga's expansive thinking and ideas, we could do anything. It could be, a palace. It could have another wing for the children. So we had to, rein ourselves in quite a bit. And then also the off-grid part kind of came last as a curveball. We weren't fully intending to be off-grid, but because we are on a farm, we're quite a ways away from the transformer. Yeah. And there's this weird thing, I guess utilities globally are all like this, but you pay for the infrastructure to get power to your house, and then they own it. Yeah. And not, interested in having neighbors anytime soon. It was quite a hefty bill. It was like $100,000 basically to get power and servicing to the boundary, not even to the house. So we priced up solar, and my family happens to be in solar in the States too. So I knew what was, viable and what the right pricing looked like. And in the end, actually, we found a wonderful New Zealand company that did it for us cheaper than my brother could have done it. Yeah. And we have a 7 kilowatt off-grid system. And basically, we just feel like we're prepared for anything. Yeah. We're not like doomsday preppers or anything like that, even though some people get excited about that these days. It just feels really good to come home at the end of the day and know that you've got everything you need and that you're living in a healthy, safe, warm house.
And it's really warm.
It is warm.
It's really light. And I saw it maybe 4 times throughout the process, like whenever I come to Martin every 4 years. And what was remarkable is Ed pretty much built the whole house, right? He figured out how to build everything, how to do everything. He taught himself everything. And I'd have conversations with him, like, what are you up to this week? And he's like, just watching YouTube videos, trying to figure out how to do this,
Totally.
And
he's mastered it. He's done a great job. We've been we were lucky to be profiled in a local magazine, and it's beautiful. The house speaks for itself, and it's signed off and compliant. And so, we're hoping to build maybe a few more of them as, sort of an investment for the future. And
because you went through some pain with the local council that had no fucking idea what you were doing.
Product management kicked in and we brought them on the journey. So in the end, actually, they brought their lunches, and Edward held brown bag lunch sessions with all of the council inspectors.
I love this.
And he won them all over one by one. He kind of explained everything in great detail, almost like energy vampire style, just kind of showing that he was completely across every little thing. And they learned a lot in the process. And so in the end, they actually brought him a gift on sign-off day. I don't know if I told you this story.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they were so proud of him for getting there because he was on the house for about 2 years solid. And he had to fold his arborist business. And so it was a huge commitment and a big sacrifice. But
you can only do that because you were obviously off in Wellington by this stage, right? So you had moved out of the closet, out of the pantry.
Yeah, came out of the closet.
And decided to take a job in Wellington.
Oh, yeah.
Coming over the hill, driving over the hill for those that live in the Wairarapa. And so what spurred that? Like, why did you decide, all right, it's time to embed yourself into New Zealand?
Yeah, well, it was a big juggling act time. And when I ended my time at lynda.com, I really wanted to actually be present here in New Zealand. So I started looking for opportunities over on that side of the hill, and there are like two. And I took one of them, and I worked at a farm ag accounting product called Farm Focus, actually, and used to be titled and branded Cash Manager. And that was really great fun. And I spent 3 years there basically doing what I do, catalyzing and building the team, bringing a 32-year-old code base into the web and forming basically multiple synchronous delivery streams in Agile and web technology. So that was all fun. And then I felt like I needed to scratch this itch on my creative side again. So I decided to start an art business. And
Ventana?
Yeah. And that was amazing for the soul and very fulfilling, but completely impractical.
Talk me through that, because it was fantastic, but you sold it in the end.
Yeah.
And so what was it, for those that don't know what it was?
Yeah. Well, Ventana Creative Collective, it's still a wonderful business in Martinborough, and my dear friend Beck is running the company now. And basically the idea and premise behind it was to make sure people were investing in the creative side, because I'm a firm believer in like whole brain utilization. And obviously with my background and, Lynda, one of my idols and mentors, all coming from a creative background, you really learn to be able to approach like a blank canvas and really problem solve with a lot more of a sort of toolkit.
Yeah.
So I wanted to invest in the community, and I felt kind of sad actually being a mother of children at the local school and not seeing a strong focus on creative arts. And coming from California, where, art is one of the biggest industries, and film. And so I wanted to just create a little bit of an art nexus for the town. And it was meant to be a creative collective, which meant there were both shows, there were live music events. We had handmade goods for sale and retail in the shop front. And we also did
classes out the back.
Yeah, so lots of art classes like jewelry, shoemaking, paint and drink wine, and learn all about the different eras of painting. And
all while you were employed in a job, by the way.
Yeah, so I spent about 6 months getting it off the ground, and then I had a team of about 6 people that ran the shop, because I insisted that we needed to be open 7 days a week. We didn't close on Tuesdays like every other business in Martinborough. I wanted to bring like life and a spark of creativity to town. So yeah, it was kind of like a donation to the town and the community. And it was pre-COVID, and I'm just kicking myself, because if I just held on a little bit longer and kept the storefront open post-COVID, because Martinborough is just booming now. Everyone's there year-round.
And art is a massive thing in Martinborough. And I wonder, the last time I went out there, that like just seeing art and the art, like the murals and the pop-up art things everywhere, I was like, did Ventana create this?
Totally. Well, we did. We were the ones behind the mural walk, and we're about to expand that to another 10 or so murals in the next year. But yeah, it goes hand in hand with a weekend retreat away, and it's not all about just the wine and going around the vineyards. It's really nice to be able to fold in a creative exercise and stretch that part of your brain, and also get together and create something with others is really kind of a formative, fun memory and experience. But it's so it's really thriving, actually. Beck she's really doubled down on the creative workshop side, not so much the retail anymore. And she does a lot of very successful workshops, and bridesmaids, hen stews come over the hill, and they'll do a full day workshop making like flower crown wreaths or doing an abstract painting. We've even had like generals coming in and doing team bonding exercises, doing abstract painting together, and
that's cool. So we'll put a little link in the comments below, so for back there for people that want to check out Ventana Collective.
Yep. So basically, I scratched that itch and realized that it was time for it to have its own life. So I set it free with Beck and spent more time back in my tech career, which is in Wellington.
I remember the conversation with Ed at a barbecue once saying, he's like, can you tell my wife that I would like to see her a little bit more, please?
Yeah. When you own your own business, it is 24/7, sadly, until it gets off the ground.
Yeah, indeed. We all know that.
Yep, sure do.
And so then you leave what was it called now? Farm IQ.
Yeah, so Farm Focus.
I knew it as CRS.
CRS. Yeah. And I took on a quick contract for a city and guilds company called Kineo. And that was fascinating. Basically, again, I was there to get everything together, form the team, get it off the ground, get the funding sorted with a automated aviation training series, which is very much, up my alley with the lynda.com background. And it was pretty cool. It was a big collection of work basically for global aviation authorities to learn how to work with the automated landing and takeoff on a plane. And so I did that program of work, got that off the ground, and then I went into the utility sector and took my first role at TransPower.
Wow, big change.
Yeah, big change, but I was ready for it. Having been, dabbled in aviation, you'll start to, pick up that I like a variety of pursuits, and I really, like turning my brain to something new that I have to learn and sort of master. And
we've often had conversations where you've said, I feel like I'm in my comfort zone now and I need to get back out of it again.
Time to stretch again. TransPower was amazing. I was really lucky to be able to kick off basically a substation robot project that had been sort of languishing and never really got off the ground. And I took it over and was able to get a full team deploying and iterating on this robot spec that is now in use live at least 2 substations in New Zealand and saving taxpayers really a whole bunch of money because it provides eyes and ears in the substation instead of sending someone out in a van and waiting when there's an outage for hours to correct some issue. One of my favorite moments in that job was actually getting some of the old engineers in the control rooms who basically hadn't been out in a substation site for decades, but also knew the equipment in those substations like the back of their hand because they were, they've been around a long time, 10-year guys with a lot of IP and wisdom. Getting them to actually drive the robot up to one of these old pieces of equipment, zoom in with the, high zoom lens, and actually to be able to read the gauge and tell all of the young engineers around them what it was and what it meant.
Wow.
It was so cool. Like just seeing that little spark of value is, that keeps me going.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, again, right? You just throwing yourself into something and like, I can figure that out.
Yeah. Well, and I guess part of what I like to bring is just not pretending to have all the answers. Yeah. And that's that vulnerability that you often get from product leaders because really it's about the better, greater good between everyone cross-functionally on the team. Yeah. And, you really lead in that.
Just put a pin in that for a second because this is something that if anyone that's read your blogs or knows of you is doing things for the greater good and doing things in a nice way, is like joyful way is something that just exudes from you, of course. And that's, if I'm honest, product people, I wouldn't say that's largely the lens that I always like see them look out of. Like, what was it about? What why do you continue to focus on that?
I love that you say that because I think it's an untapped opportunity in New Zealand. And one of the things I've often struggled with in this market is the fact that you don't really have really full, sophisticated working product yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. And you might see different attitudes from product people here, partially because they're still trying to figure it out. And they're probably often really out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it's no magic formula at all. But I think what really needs to happen to be able to set up a successful product organization is to have support from the top.
Yeah.
And that is strategy comes from the team. Yeah. And you iterate and you run experiments and you test and you validate with data. And a lot of companies here are still structured in a pretty traditional way with decision-making at the top in a very sort of top-down management style and, dare I say it, command and control.
Yeah.
And those are all definitely killers for a thriving product environment. And it's really interesting times right now, particularly in the US, because the tech sort of boom-bust is underway again, kind of like it was in 9/11. And you see these big unicorn tech companies with these kind of dictator leaders at the helm. And they're often not running in the same sort of product way that I was lucky enough to grow up in at lynda.com. There is still very much that sort of pendulum overcorrection and swing back to traditional management where you're in or you're out, you're doing it this way, or you leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's weird to see that happening. And that's one of the things that kind of keeps me up at night. Like, God, it's almost like this sort of final throes of resistance of the traditional way of leading a company are really in our faces now.
Yeah.
And I think that hopefully what's coming out the other side is just a new way of organizing ourselves and delivering useful things, and definitely for the greater good. Because, I could go off on quite a tangent here, but we're entering like the age of scarcity where we need to make things last and we need to make things of real value. And it's not just going to be a quick overnight success thing. So you've got to take care of your people. You've got to have them there year over year for the long term. And so thinking about, human-centered design and really organizing teams in a way that sets them up for success for who they are and bringing their full selves to work. Yeah. All that stuff's really important and matters more than ever.
I can tell you as a recruiter, it's much easier getting people out of teams in command and control style management structure than it is for self-managed teams. It's definitely like if I need to recruit someone, I definitely know what organizations I can go to very quickly.
Yeah.
Because they don't feel like they have as much buy-in. They don't feel like they're contributing as much. They don't feel happy, and so...
We're all knowledge workers. We have some of the smartest people around us, and why not give them total, remit to be able to deliver to their best ability? And that doesn't mean no feedback. It doesn't mean setting guardrails and boundaries. Like, I'm all for radical candor and feedback. Yeah. Like, it's a gift to give someone really honest feedback and help kind of nudge them toward the right direction. But it doesn't mean that,
you don't have to be an asshole.
Yeah.
And I hear this thing all the time.
Or disconnect or cancel.
Yeah. I hear this thing all the time. Oh, I don't care to be liked. I care to be respected. I'm like, yeah, well, that's just you being a douchebag, right? Like, and so I think naturally as humans, we all want to be liked and we all want to like people, right? And I think that people are just too scared to learn the right tools and knowledge to be able to figure out how to manage people by still staying nice, And so, well, I think that's credit to you. That's one thing that I've always admired about you,
totally.
Over the years.
Well, and I think we need to create a movement around it, because I think more and more like people are suffering in this traditional sort of organization style, and it's not going to last. It's changing. It's being disrupted every day.
I know a good recruitment company.
I do too. Yeah. We've built a few teams together, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. So then you've deployed robots in New Zealand this stage in your career. What's next?
Well, the last 3 years, actually. So I went from TransPower to my first startup CEO role at FinTech, cleverly disguised as Trove. I think we did so much recruiting for the time I was there that everyone knows about it, and that we're doing something exciting. So I've actually just, I mentioned at the start that I'm enjoying a couple months off. I've just left the team to continue their go-to-market strategy. Yep. But spent an amazing 3.5 years, basically getting an initiative off the ground, forming a team, getting a whole product practice in place.
So talk to me about that, because when you started, there was zero, right? Mm-hmm. Zero people. You were
I was employee one.
Employee one, right? And so what the fuck do you do? And so for people that don't know, Trove was funded by a bigger financial company. And so I imagine there's some challenges there from the start in terms of like trying to figure out how to be a startup or teach them how to be a startup. So talk me through what do you do?
Yeah, well, I think translation is always very key, particularly when you're working with another new sector, which I love to embrace and take on the challenge of learning. So the language of finance was really important to understand and learn. And obviously being a fintech, we were in a highly regulated space. Yeah. So developing those relationships upfront was really key and really important, and making sure that you have buy-in and you have support, which I was able to do and get across the line, and set some expectations around time and runway. Yeah. So one of the first things I did was confirm our runway, made sure that we knew we had a runway in place, that it was supported from the top down, and then started to build my team. One of the first things that we ended up doing, though, was making sure that we were running development in-house. Yeah. And that's something that I've done at a number of roles now is, there's an outsource model sometimes that can be cheaper and look more attractive commercially at the start, but you'll always end up paying double or triple in the end, because there's just that disconnect. There's too much of not a shared vision or shared basically skin in the game for where you're going and what you're trying to achieve. So that vendor model is good in a pinch, but it's never really the best way to build something from the ground up. So that was one of the things that I did first. And so I knew that we needed technical competency, and with sort of my big grand ideas and thinking. I wanted to build global from day one. And so we recruited a team that was used to being able to go global and build in a way that was very scalable and modern, and AWS tech stack. And so, I basically put in place a bit of a plan and a strategy, and using that runway and getting to market, and then quickly recruited our team using the services of one of our favorite recruiter companies. So I'm really proud of the team, and watch this space. They'll be launching something new to market soon.
Awesome. And, I can't wait to see. Let's go back a little bit there, because the one thing that I've noticed about you, Auriga, of dealing with you over the years, is that you're very self-aware of what you need to, like, you talk about it as you always are intrigued to learn and throw yourself into finance, but you didn't just throw yourself into finance. Like, you were attending the money conferences in the US, you were reading, like, you were quoting stuff to me all the time that I was like, I have no idea what she's talking about, but I'm going to go off and look into that afterwards. Like the AML legislations and everything that you were able to get your head around information really quickly. How do you do that?
Well, I immerse myself into what I'm focusing on, and I'm probably all in usually on my job, and whether it's my own company or whether I'm running a company or running a team for someone else, I really believe in sort of being aligned with my purpose and that greater good. So if you have that destination and that sort of outcome in mind, I basically put all my energy into it, and I can't stop but think about it all the time, and I want to make the right connections to understand the industry, understand the sector, really understand what those value gap areas are. And particularly with this opportunity, it was really exciting to be able to think global from day one. So I really wanted to tap into the fintech space in the States, because New Zealand's done a great job and obviously is a wonderful operating financial sector, but it is quite insular. And so having that opportunity to sort of borrow and observe what was happening overseas was really compelling. So it was very motivating for me to learn as much as I could. And another thing I noticed about you is you've always got the right mentors in every role that you're in as well. Like, you're always telling me, I'm catching up with so and so, and I'm like, how the fuck? What? How has having these mentors sort of helped you? Yeah, absolutely. Learning is the best way to be, I think, and modeling that as a leader, that continuous learning, and not being afraid to say, I'm learning about this and I don't have all the answers, is really important. It's like something I really take, number one and as a focus. So having mentors that are pushing me and stretching me and thinking of things that I'm missing, because I obviously won't have all the answers, particularly in a new sector, is really important to me. And I think that everyone, when they really are doing something they love and are passionate about, should always challenge themselves to have someone else there, and someone to push them and to call them too on the things they're missing, because inevitably, more minds are better than one.
Agree totally. That's the first thing I'll say to an early stage startup client of mine is they'll say, we want to do all this, and I go, great, and who are your mentors and what are you thinking about, and who's sort of challenging your thoughts, and
totally.
And if they say nobody, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's dangerous. I mean, to the extreme example, that what's happening with FTX right now is disaster. I mean, that just is an example of, I think, unbridled startup gone wild without any sort of structure or, governance, and sort of anyone who's, from the traditional sector looking in, that seems to me that, that was probably a lot of ego involved and a lot of sort of cowboy thinking. And
I can't wait to watch the documentary or listen to the podcast, because the political ties, the scandalous sort of relationships that were happening, with the exec teams. And
it could be another Theranos story from the sounds of it.
Interesting story. But, with that level of security in terms of how the fuck did that happen?
And how'd they get the funding that they got is one of my big questions, interestingly. And so I think it's important, though, to also know that innovation is never perfect. So there will be Wild West times when it's all over the place, and there are a lot of kind of big, failures, which have to be learned from and examined. And that's part of, a product approach, is to run experiments and to be aware of things not always working, and to iterate and learn as quickly as you can. And, that fail fast saying is so important to embrace, but within safety, within some reasonable limits. And I think, part of what tech has been in the last 20 years is it's been kind of a free-for-all. And there's so much massive funding going into things where there's a confident pitch and a confident team. but no one's really peering under the hood, and it's all so ego driven. And so I think it's really important when you find those mentors to make sure that they're checking your ego and that you're thinking about your decision making and that you're thinking about what you're missing and what your blind spots are. And that's all part of it. You know, it's
and not to
whole
be scared about being
360.
honest. You know, like that's the thing. Like I deal with so many founders that have imposter syndrome and they have high anxiety, and they'll call me late at night freaking out about something, and I'm like, man, that's because you're trying to hide it. You know, like just be really honest, and you know, that's okay.
It's part of the journey.
We're all like that, right?
Totally.
So,
yeah. You don't get much sleep when you're a founder, and it's important to get help with that and support and stay well, you know, mentally.
How did you stay well? Because obviously you were living in Martinborough, commuting, pretty high, like CEO of a company, you know, like how did you look after yourself?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I think I probably could have done better. I did sacrifice a lot of my personal time, pouring all of myself into this initiative. And I think it's important to be able to make sure that you've got people who you love and who know you, who do call you on it. And taking time off is really important. One of the first things I did with this particular initiative was make sure that remote working was there, so that there could be days in the week when I could see my family, you know, at breakfast and after school when they got off the bus. And so making sure that I set boundaries, and I've learned a lot about that as a startup founder, making sure that you have boundaries that you prioritize. And if there's like one or two things that you know, if they're taken away, will really deplete you, make sure that you never compromise on those again. And, you know, as a wise, 44 almost year old, I think that's one of the number one pieces of advice I could give people, you know, when they're embarking on this journey where they're all in. Make sure you prioritize those one or two important boundary areas. And it's something to be proud of. And I think increasingly, just like you model vulnerability and not having all the answers as a leader, it's important to also model taking care of yourself and being human.
Yeah, burnout is real.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to think that everything can be automated and you can just be like a machine and push your way through. But we're all human and we have our limits. And sometimes it's to the detriment of the company if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Like you know, obviously I've demoted myself recently, and you know that's because I was burning out every other month. You know, like you can't keep operating at that pace. Something's going to take. You know, something's going to give. Sorry, and so that's amazing that you obviously look back now. Like what other things that you look at, you think, oh, I probably should have done that differently.
Well, I think one of the things, probably a little bit of imposter syndrome kicked in at the start of this most recent fintech journey, and I hired for competency in a big way. And I was excited about the global opportunity and scale from day one. And I think I'll learn a lot more about thinking about my first impulses around team fit and that culture piece. I've always been so people oriented, but I almost take it for granted because I myself make really great connections with people. And I think in hindsight, you can do more to really prioritize culture and making sure that there's alignment around culture. It's really important. And sometimes you can't control culture. Sometimes it becomes its own thing. And I learned so much about that in this journey, particularly as an American, being in a Kiwi world. Sometimes it needs to become its own culture. And that's really important. And I never wanted to feel like I was boxing in or keeping the team sort of constrained in some way because I had a different view of what culture could be. And so I think, being really aware of those sort of intangibles between people and addressing them. And I still don't know the answer yet.
I was going to say, how do you do that? That's something that, like, as a recruiter, we hear that all the time, right? Like, how do you build culture? How do you design culture? How do you do that? And I don't know. I think, like, you know, we should all learn from crazy, you know, hippie Americans where they go to the desert and take acid together as a start team and, you know, like...
Well, you talk about everything.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm driving my husband crazy all the time. When there's a problem, we talk about it. And I wish I had done more of that.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. Is
in all directions.
I think the one thing that I've learned from business, you know, like I'm setting up another business at the moment now and I'm like, hey, before we even do this, and we need to sit around the table and like spend the whole day and have some drinks and talk. And because I think it's really important to be authentically yourself from day one and draw that out of people as well so that you can see the type of person that you're going to be working with in the good and the bad situations and know what, you know, like who you're going to go to war with.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely. And, you know, one thing I do, I'm always an optimist. And so I also believe in my integrity, but also my longevity. So I will always push through and get through whatever needs doing. But that's always that's actually often unfair to those around me.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to spend more time in the fear. You need to actually talk about the worst nightmare and really go down deep and explicit with it. And sometimes I feel like I'm wasting time talking about that, worst case scenario stuff. But, one of my favorite Kiwiisms is constraints are liberating. Yeah. So if you really dig deep into those constraints and those fears, and you make a plan for them, and even if you never use it, you keep it in your back pocket and you keep it on the shelf, and it makes people feel more assured. And that sort of helps them feel safer at work. And so I learned a lot about that, actually, and would continue to do that, dive into the problem areas and own it, and just not be afraid to shy away from it.
Yeah. I think the one thing I would do, if I could go back, like Jono, a producer, just did a really interesting shoot with the Somerset group where he's gone back and is interviewing people, retirees in the Somerset group, and asking them the question. What's the question, Jono?
What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Wow, I love that question.
Yeah, they're all over 70.
And hearing the answers is amazing, and I think, and it always gets me thinking, what would I do if I could go back and do it again? Or what advice would I give myself? And the advice I would give myself in business is stop wearing a mask. I feel like sometimes you wear a mask because you think you're in business, or you think you're a business leader, or you think, and I would just be authentically myself from day one, so that people know who I am, what I'm like to work with, and I'd try and draw that out of people straight away, just so that like, we're all different for cool, funny, amazing ways. But as long as you know that you can just be yourself, it eliminates a lot of the bullshit conversations that happen,
Totally.
or not what's not being said,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now that leads to pretty exciting times now. So, like, you've gone off and gone to the desert, as a true Californian American. Yeah.
Gone on my retreat.
Yeah. And then come back and decided that you wanted to give back now, and you want to be a mentor yourself now for people, which I think is fucking amazing.
Yeah. I'm not sure yet how it will unfold, but I really want to take on a portfolio of advisory roles and really around this people-oriented org design and being that catalyst in how we might make something happen. But essentially has to be people first. Yeah. There are a lot of consulting companies out there that will talk about formulas or, vision and strategy, which is all fine and good, but they often focus on the top and the senior leadership or the board. And what I am passionate about is really getting the teams involved and making sure that there's buy-in and engagement, but also all the best ideas are coming from the people actually doing the work. And so I want to explore that space, particularly in that lens of the greater good. Yeah. I've learned a lot about ESG and its shortcomings and failings, and there's a lot more attention, but also really great traction in the way capital is allocated globally around environmental and social good measures. Yeah. Watch this space. I'm looking for global, but also in New Zealand market advisory roles, and really help companies be faster and more innovative, but also thinking about more of that product type of org structure that really brings the best out of their people.
Awesome. Yeah. And so we'll put some links below if someone wants to get in contact with you regarding that. And so I think we always ask this one question at the end on the podcast, and I think this will resonate with you. What makes you happy?
Wow. So much makes me happy, actually. But I have to say, having that grounding with my family and in our home and that retreat is really important, that yin and yang element in my life, which my husband and my kids give me so much of. So never want to be so far away and so commercially focused that I don't have that strong connection back to my home and my roots. Yeah. So, family's a big thing. I'm really proud.
Amazing girls that are like going ridiculously well.
I know, it's terrifying. New Zealand mountain bike downhill champions. Yeah. I feel
like every time I go on Instagram,
there's another race.
Yeah, they've won some race. So
yeah, we're really fortunate to have invested a lot in the girls' riding capability early, and Word Ash is amazing program that gives kids really great bike skills and teaches them, all the fundamentals you need to ride some of the gnarly downhill tracks out there that New Zealand is, so
He's shit scared
abounding.
every time you watch them ride there.
Yeah, I am, absolutely. But Capella, my 13-year-old, she's just in her element. She's happier than can be. Yeah. She talks to herself on her bike. She's doing the latest jump was a 50-foot gap. She's wearing all of her protective gear, her neck brace, her body armor, and she's doing something she loves. But yeah, that's something else I'm exploring, getting more involved with, and learning the whole bike world, and learning to be a bike mom and be down at the bottom of the race and give her the right pep talks. They're more like bike dads, actually.
Yeah,
I was thinking about we should do a documentary on the bike dads. They get pretty excited. And there's this amazing phenomenon actually in New Zealand. I won't go off on too big of a tangent, but there are all these, this Rat Pack girl group, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. Actually, Jenna Hastings from Rotorua just won the World Cup Juniors from New Zealand. So there's this whole 5-year sort of timeline of these amazing girl riders in New Zealand, and they're going to be, on the world stage in a matter of, years and months, and it's pretty cool. There's obviously a really great infrastructure here, and everything that Word has done has really benefited the community.
So what's Word?
And it's the Wellington Off-Road Department, but they've now launched in lots of other regions: Porirua, Queenstown, Wanaka, and basically from 7 and up. It's a riding group that you go out with every week.
Ed used to bring the
totally.
girls in.
Yeah. So we come over the hill Wednesday and Thursday every week, and they ride with a group of same-aged kids. The cool thing about it, though, is it has this whole circular sort of economy. The instructors are all teens that have graduated from the Word group, and then they have something to do, and they get paid to teach.
Awesome.
And so it's kind of this self-fulfilling, virtuous circle. And all these confident kids come out of it, and loving what they do, and keeps them occupied, and challenging themselves and pushing their comfort zone, all the good things,
That's all you want to see your kids doing, right? Is just doing something that they're passionate and happy about, right?
Well, and having those goals and achieving them is really important. It sets you up well in life.
And so you said that earlier, I was always going to come back to this, that you were thinking about sending the girls to your school. So what does that mean for their biking careers?
Yeah. Well, we might have to stop recording here. We haven't spent a lot of time really as a family talking about this, but the riding in New Zealand is so far superior, the technical downhill riding, than it is in California for sure. That's something we need to consider, and whether or not, Capella can miss school in high school is one of the big questions. And so, we have a lot of exciting family chats coming to kind of explore what that looks like. It could just be, another remote sort of career and focus for me. Now? They're just in Martinborough now, and Kuranui is just around the corner, and it's a great school.
Because how old's Capella? 12?
She's 13 now.
13,
yeah, so she'll start next term, February.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's exciting times. We have little adults on the way.
Oh, yeah. I know.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I know. It's I feel like I was saying to someone before, I feel like I was an amazing father for a daughter up until 13, and now I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's a new chapter.
Is just amazing mum now, and I'm just on the sidelines going, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, I think you're not alone. I think there are a lot of dads and moms that feel that way. But they're starting to become their own people, and it's really important to give them just enough support, enough boundaries, but again, believe in them, and make sure they're safe. Don't try and box them in too much. But my California nature is tested all the time, that's for sure. Well,
and honestly, I often talk about my kids are such great human beings now because of the upbringing they had in Martinborough, and I think that young rural sort of community, does really give you a good grounding about just being a good human.
Totally. Well, and watching plants grow, having a garden, walking around with no shoes on, those are all things you can't trade. You can't have that in most places in the world right now. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, on that note, I'll let you get back over the hill.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us
My
today.
pleasure.
And always a pleasure. And I always, as I said, I always feel happier when I talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
I love chatting with Auriga. As I said, every time I chat with her, she just makes me really happy. And so I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Please like and share below. Send it to anyone that you think might enjoy. And please comment on who you'd love to see next on the pod. Until then.